Hey there, bookworms, and welcome to today's Noise in a Book. Today we are going to be traveling back in time to 1902, to Stockholm, Sweden. We are at the Nobel Prize Awards. The Nobel Prize for Physics went to Henrik Anton Lorentz and Peter Zeeman of the Netherlands for research on the influence of magnetism upon the radiation phenomena. The Nobel Prize for Chemistry went to Hermann Emil Fischer of Germany for his work on sugar and peron synthesis. For his research on malaria and figuring out it was mosquitoes that led to infection, the Nobel Prize for Physiology went to British citizen Ronald Ross, and the Nobel Peace Prize went to two individuals that year. The first to the Secretary General of the International Peace Bureau, who believed people could be taught to choose peaceful solutions, Elie Docum of Switzerland, and the second to Charles Albert Gobat, also of Switzerland, who was the Secretary General of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, for his efforts to bring together popularly elected representatives from various countries. The Nobel Prize for Literature went to the greatest living master of historical writing, with special reference to his work, A History of Rome, Theodor Mommsen. Born November 30th, 1817, in the Duchy of Schleswig, which no longer exists. That is now, part of it is now Germany, and part of it is now Denmark. He was studying the theory of law at the University of Kiel in Holstein when he got a grant from Denmark to go study Roman inscriptions in France and Italy, and he decided, why not? Bam! Rome is his life, because he is the ultimate nerd. He found something super obscure that he was really passionate about and wrote about it and was well respected for it because he became incredibly knowledgeable about Rome. In Volume 1 of the History of Rome, he says, "History as such cannot reproduce the life of a people in the infinite variety of its details. It must be content with exhibiting the development of that life as a whole. The doings and dealings, the thoughts and imaginings of the individual, however strongly they may reflect the characteristics of the national mind, form no part of history. Nevertheless, it seems necessary to make some attempt to indicate, only in the most general outlines, the features of individual life in the case of those earlier ages which are, so far as history is concerned, all but lost in oblivion, for it is in this field of research alone that we acquire some idea of the breadth of the gulf which separates our modes of thinking and feeling from those of the civilized nations of antiquity. Tradition, with its confused mass of international names and its dim legends, resembles withered leaves which with difficulty we recognize to have once been green." He was so passionate about Rome and the history of its people and its Caesars and its monarchs and its democracy. That passion could not help but leak into his writing. When his house was being completely destroyed by a fire, he got burned trying to save his papers and trying to save borrowed library books. Once they were finally able to get him outside, they had to restrain him there to keep him from continuing to run back in to save this knowledge that was so precious to him. He established an entirely new framework for the way that we study Rome. He also pioneered epigraphy, which is the study of inscriptions in history. Julius Caesar was this man's hero. Now, I don't know exactly what that says about Theodor Mommsen, since Caesar, while doing some pretty cool stuff, was not the greatest guy. So the History of Rome is 5 volumes long, each of them about 600 pages. And it was never completed. It only goes up as far as Julius Caesar. The reason he never finished the History of Rome was because he could not bring himself to write the death of Caesar. In 1858, he became a member of the Academy of Sciences in Berlin. He is one of 3 Nobel Prize winners out of 110 total who only writes nonfiction. He is still the oldest recipient of the Nobel Prize for Literature. Mommsen's passion didn't just garner him awards. It also earned him the respect of so many writers. Bernard Shaw cited Mommsen's Julius Caesar as his inspiration for writing Caesar and Cleopatra. In The Chicago of Europe and Other Tales of Foreign Travel, Mark Twain wrote this about meeting Theodor Mommsen. There was an excited whisper at our table. Mommsen, and the whole house rose and shouted and stamped and clapped and banged the beer mugs. Simply a storm. Then the little man with his long hair and Emersonian face edged his way past us and took his seat. I could have touched him with my hand. Mommsen. Think of it. I would have walked a great many miles to get a sight of him, and here he was without trouble or tramp or cost of any kind. Here he was, clothed in a titanic, deceptive modesty, which made him look like other men. Here he was, carrying the Roman world and all the Caesars in his hospitable skull, and doing it as easily as that other luminous vault, the skull of the universe, carries the Milky Way and the stars. Theodor Mommsen once said, "The writer of history is perhaps closer to the artist than the scholar." I don't know how much I agree with him, but I do believe that that is Theodor Mommsen. As a historian, he is far closer to an artist than many scholars of Rome that I have had as teachers and that I have had to read in textbooks. He passed away on November 1st, 1903, in Charlottenburg in Germany, at the age of 95 years old. Thank you, Theodor Mommsen, for your contributions to literature and for the history of Rome. Bookworms, pray charge your glasses and be upstanding. To Theodor Mommsen. Thank you so much for reading, and have a great day. I am still reading The History of Rome by Theodor Mommsen. I am still in Volume 1. I am 252 pages in. I didn't have a review this week because I'm still reading this book. Volume 1 consists of Book 1 of The History of Rome and the beginning of Book 2. I'm probably going to read something else after I finish Book 1. But I thought this might be a little interesting thing to do for my Friday Reads, is bring you a little bit about Theodor Mommsen, because he was a bit of a badass. He was a total nerd, and I love my nerds. Thought that was just some cool information about someone who has won a very prestigious award for literature, the Nobel Prize, and the reason that I am reading Theodor Mommsen's The History of Rome.